time. Newsfirst, face to face with Charlene Benedict.
It is easy to dodge our responsibilities, but what is not easy is to dodge the consequences of dodging our responsibilities. A very good evening and welcome to the first episode of Face to Face. And joining us on our very first inaugural episode, of course, is a person who has been quite vociferous about the actions that have been taken by this government, although he himself was instrumental in forming the previous government, of course, that was moved out back in 2022. We've got with us today former chairman of the COPE committee, parliamentarian from the People's Freedom Congress, Professor Charitha Herath. Professor, a very good evening and welcome to the show.
Very good evening, Charlene. Thank you very much for having me for your first
Definitely, Professor.
Yes.
It is, of course, our pleasure to have you on the show, an intellectual such as yourself. Professor, however, we are having this program today at a time when Sri Lankans are facing some of the most grim times that any Sri Lankan had to go through during the recent past, at least since independence. No Sri Lankans have suffered this much since the time of independence. Economically, cost of living is through the roof, taxes keep on rising, and in the middle of all of this, Sri Lanka is now bankrupt. Professor, people are very angry, Professor. Do you feel the fact that people are very angry, Professor?
Yes, of course, and it is a very serious issue that we all face, and we all know that the peoples are getting all of this burden into their hand, and as you said, the tax burden is one of the major one, and there were many other issues.
Professor, in the middle of all of this, Professor, now while you come on this program and acknowledge the fact that people are angry and their anger is very well placed, there are those, Professor, especially with this Supreme Court judgment on the economic crimes fundamental rights case, as it has now been called, where the Supreme Court held that two former presidents, at the time though, former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, Basil Rajapaksa and several other top brass members in the government were responsible for the economic situation in the country right now. Since this judgment has come out, there have been views appreciating the judgment, of holding people in power to account, and there have been views also expressing displeasure against this judgment. And what I see when I look at these statements made by several parliamentarians, of course, from the government, they completely blame the people for the economic situation in the country. For example, former Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa, when he landed in Sri Lanka recently, speaking to the media, said that taxes have increased since the people wanted Gotabaya Rajapaksa out when he reduced taxes. So we're not going to reduce taxes anymore. It's the people's fault. Then there have been several other parliamentarians, of course, from the government saying that it is because the people deposed Gotabaya Rajapaksa that this situation has come about. What is your take on this?
Well, we have to be very clear on this issue, Charlene. Now, when I was the chair of the COPE, we have also proposed that we just need to look at what has happened in year 2018 to 2022, what went wrong, and how this fallen happened, like how this crisis began. So it was not allowed by some of the some people of the government at that time. Then I was not able to start that investigation. So then now
on this economic crisis,
on
Professor,
the same issue.
So, Professor, you were the chairman of COPE from during which period, Professor?
2020 to 22.
2020 to 22. So the economic crimes or the misinformed decisions that these top officials of government took and now have been held to book by the Supreme Court happened during your chairmanship of the COPE committee.
Yeah, like COPE doesn't have any link with this government decision-making processes. What we have done was to look at and examine how the finance ministry works at that time, and how finance secretary has taken decisions and things like that. But now you ask what is my take on this judgment. I think this is landmark kind of judgment in our political history, and this judgment touches very important couple of issues. One is public trust, and they have argued that all the governments or the political representatives should maintain the public trust, and they are not supposed to leave it and take the decision what they want. And if you are presenting a manifesto to people, then the vote should be related with the manifesto. That is the promise, that is the social contract between the government and the people. So you are not supposed to break that link, that contract. That is the point that the judgment has taken very sharply, that the public trust should be maintained, should be protected. And this group of people who were taking economic decisions at that time were not adhering, not going accordingly to the public trust at that time. So that was the one argument that was raised in the judgment. And the second one was the decision making process of that monetary board in the central bank and the treasury. These are two different institutions but in the same states, and the monetary policy is related with the monetary board, and they have to take that decision. And fiscal policy of the government should be taken by the treasury. So now what happened in this period of time was that those two different decision making processes were interlinked by the force of maybe political hands. So then they have mixed the decision making together, and the monetary policies were mixed with the fiscal policies, and fiscal policy chiefs were taking monetary policies at that time. So those are the kind of issues. So those issues were taken into the consideration of this judgment, it seems, and I know that there was a very substantive report submitted by the Auditor General on this regard, and there were two reports, and those reports are really important to look at what has happened at that time. And I think we need to take this judgment very seriously, and we need to look at more in-depth details of this decision-making process from 2018 to 22. But I am not saying that the whole issue of this economic crisis was started from 2018. There were many other related issues, even 2015 to 19 government. That you call Yahapalana government, whatever Palana that they have done, but that was the government that was run the country from 2015 to 19. Yes. And at that time there were also wrong decision making happen in the sector of finance. So I think we need to look at that part as well, but in this particular judgment it was focused on this 19 to 22.
Professor, now you spoke about the Monetary Board, and several members of the Monetary Board have also been held accountable, but what's notable is the fact that President's Counsel Sanjeeva Jayawardena, who is a member of the Monetary Board, along with one other person, has been absolved because they took action. They informed the relevant authorities, they informed the relevant decision makers about the impending crisis and what would happen if certain decisions that have been called to question in the judgment of the Supreme Court were taken. Now, Professor Charitha Herath, recently Prasanna Jayawardena, parliamentarian, speaking in Parliament, said that this judgment was merely given on
Prasanna Ranatunga.
Yes, Prasanna Ranatunga. This judgment was merely given on written submissions, and therefore it holds no weight. You don't agree with him on that point, do you?
Well, I don't want to talk anything about this judgment in that nature. But as you said, Sanjeev Jayawardene and Rani Jayamaha were two members of that monetary board, and even when they came to court, they have claimed and they have submitted that they have
taken all the actions,
and they have minuted their positions separately in the monetary board proceedings. So I think that was a very good thing, and even when you are in a committee in that nature, you need to be very careful the decision that you are taking,
because it affects the entire general
completely.
public.
It is affecting to the country, entire country, and the future as well.
Professor, you too are a parliamentarian, and decisions taken in Parliament also affect the entire country. Now, Professor, you were also instrumental in bringing President Gotabaya Rajapaksa into power back in the day. There were many promises given. There was a manifesto, like you said, and the Supreme Court judgment has very rightly mentioned that this manifesto forms the basis of the social contract between the people and the government that they elect. Now, Professor, it's clear that the previous government under Gotabaya Rajapaksa did not adhere to the manifesto that they presented to the people. They did not adhere to that. So, Professor, could you also absolve yourself from these crimes or these consequences that the people in Sri Lanka are suffering right now as a result of having stood your ground and said, no, this is not what we need to do. We should do better. We should do different. Just like President's Counsel Sanjeev Jayawardene.
Well, yeah, that is good questions, and there were a couple of spaces that we were able to discuss these issues and put our disagreements.
Okay.
Even one was the parliamentary group meeting where we have discussed some of these issues and put our disagreements.
Okay.
When I have started my court proceedings from 2020 to 22, I think you can see all records that I have been trying my best to get some of these wrongdoing into the main table and to clear all of these things. Even I, who summoned the monetary board of the central bank and discussed this issue openly, and that was the first time that all these minutes were getting into the public discussions, and those were the kind of ways that we have engaged, and finally we have given up that applications, and we came to the independency because we were not able to go with that political line because they have completely violated the mandate. The mandate was stolen. So that is the kind of easiest way to say that that we got a mandate from the people. That mandate was stolen by a group of people. So then the direction was completely changed, and then we were directed to a kind of disaster which we are experiencing.
So, Professor, is it safe to say that you will never again in your life stand with those who stole that mandate of the people?
Yeah, well, that is true. I mean, we are completely independent from some of these positions, and we have our criticism clearly stated, and we have shown our positions on many issues which have been discussed in these days, and we are not with that line, and we suggest many of the good people who are in that side also to take a kind of independent stand. So
you are of the opinion that there are still some good people among those who stole the mandate of the general public?
No, like that is not like I mean the group of people are now divided into couple of teams.
You're speaking about those in government.
Okay. And there are some good people in the government as well. I want to say that we want them to also think that there were some wrongdoings happens, and we have to have a kind of self-criticism on those things, and they also need to get into kind of independent positions on some of the matters.
But Professor, now I'm not a politician, so when I speak to you and when I ask you questions, I'm asking in the perspective of a member of the general public. To us, looking from down low at those in power, at those in parliament, at those who we appointed as leaders to bring some sort of prosperity to Sri Lanka, what we see is that these divisions on policy, these divisions on how the country should move forward, these debates that are at times being seen in Parliament and outside, these fights on what the future course of Sri Lanka should be, are very malleable to change. For example, I don't think 2 to 3 years ago anyone would have ever thought that the SLPP would willingly elect President Ranil Wickremesinghe to the position that he is in now. Even until very recently, till the president was elected, even when President Ranil Wickremesinghe was Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe under President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, there were parliamentarians who said that we are never going to appoint him as a president. Why do we need to do that? We have a president. So when it comes to these separations in policy now, that people have lost trust. So what kind of an assurance can you give, Professor, that, seeing that the people see it fit to give your policies, your team, as it is, a chance at the next parliamentary election, that you will not go running back to the same people who you are so seriously criticizing right now?
Well, that you have to be kind of open and very clear on your policies and positions. That is one thing. Another thing, I agree with you that there were a lot of that kind of trust violations were happening in the political stage. I think one thing should be clear, that we all have to play this game within the same ground. We can't just bring somebody from somewhere we don't know, we need to.
But Professor, you advocated for that when you brought in President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, did you not?
No, that is true, but what we need to do is to clearly look at the people's kind of nature of engagement of this kind of decision making processes. There were some people who have always been showing the same kind of changing policies due to kind of their own reasons. But we need to be very clear on that, who the people we are going to select, number one. Number two, what are the policies that they are going to bring. Number three, whether that group of people are capable enough to deliver according to the policies that they have been preaching. So now here country is now leading for another disaster, where people are distrusting, rejecting almost all the political system, including the people, which is not correct.
Okay.
End of the day, if we are saying that we don't like politics or we hate politics, we don't want this, then what we are hating is our future. What we are rejecting is our future and our next generation's future. So what we need to do is to engage in this process and not to completely reject it. And number two, we are not supposed to take a decision with that angry mood. And this is a very sharp political decision that we need to do, we need to take. So we need to be clear that who the people we are going to select and what are the policies that we are going to accept, and whether those group of people can deliver what they preach. So
but Professor, do you genuinely believe that the people are just angry at politics? Maybe I have a different take. I see people who are angry at impunity, at politicians enjoying so much impunity. For example, certain respondents that were named as those responsible for violating the fundamental rights of the general public were seen partying just a few days later, along with the president, no less. So when people see these kind of things, these are representative of impunity. It's, for example, as if a leader is saying, look here, I've done this, the Supreme Court has said this, but I don't care. I'm going to live my life. Impunity. No, that is one of the main things that people are angry about.
That I understand, and I can see clearly what you're saying. It's true, and that there are people can take a decision that if you are going into this kind of nature of engagement, then you have to take a decision on those people. But here issue is, Shalan, now some people, I have heard that some people are thinking that we need to reject all the system, including the people, and to get some good new group of team. But sometime I can see that, you know, just the criticism will not bring new policy changes of this country, new implementations to the developments. So you have to have a criticism, but criticism itself will not provide the answer.
Understood.
So what we need to do is to look at what is the criticism and who is doing that thing, and whether this group of people are capable to, you know, change the things that are needed, and all these kind of things should be looked at, not just you know, I mean, rejecting with angry mood solve the issue. That is my position.
Professor, on the subject of corruption and fraud, I think that has been a talking point in many an election. I believe even back in the 70s, this was a talking point: corruption and fraud. This came much into the limelight after the 78 constitution that introduced the executive presidency, and since then consecutive governments have come into power on the sole promise of doing away with fraud and corruption. What better time to start this process than now, Professor? But we still see, I mean, especially at the COPE hearings, when we look at what transpires there, the impunity that these public officials appointed by leaders that we have elected to hold public office in trust for us, the way they answer the questions, Professor, I think you would have experienced this as the chairman of the COPE committee, the way things are spoken of. For example, Professor, how answers were given regarding the NMRA data wipe, the NMRA scam of importing immunoglobulin vaccines. Now, these are people's money, Professor. Why is it so hard, Professor, to at least bring to justice a few, not all, but a few massive cases of fraud and corruption that has taken place in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, this is very serious issue, and there are a couple of lapses in the legal system as well. We have to understand, and we have to consider that as well. But we have enough legal tools to even to catch or even to get hold some of these issues, like, you know, some of these people into.
But Professor, now when you say there are lapses in the legal system, could you specify where in the legal system? Because in my view, of course, it is the investigation stage, that when investigations are conducted, there is so much political influence, and these matters need to be proved beyond reasonable doubt, which is a very, very, very high standard. And of course, in the middle of all of this, and I believe even this is the same for the April 21st attack in 2019, the Easter Sunday bombings, investigating officers were changed, investigations were diverted to different paths. And at the end of the day, when all the facts that have been collected are incomplete and presented to a court of law, obviously that court of law can't find that this matter has been proved beyond reasonable doubt. So, do you agree with me on that point? That is the issue.
That is so. There are some structural violence happening there, like, you know, and the technical violence as well. So you are collecting data to form a case, but sometimes the data will not matching each other. Then, as you said, that, you know, legal jargons will come, that, you know, issue will be thrown out. But now you ask me a good questions, that what are the lapses in legal system. Now, one very important issue is that we don't have kind of procedure or kind of regulation to catch this stolen national assets. So we have been talking to get a act for recovery of stolen national asset, but it was not materialized yet, and I hope now, even I need to consider here that the present Minister of Justice has been bringing many new different kind of legal regulations to Parliament, and I hope that he could be able to get this one as well. But, you know, this is one very important regulations that we need to get passed at the Parliament, recovery of stolen national assets. So this is one thing, and there are some other implementations issue, like issues of implementations of some of these examinations and investigations, and some presidential commissions reports were just part of literature, and those were not taken into consideration for next steps.
And mind you, Professor, these presidential commission reports were made at the expense of the general public.
That is also true. I mean, there's some
millions were spent on that.
No, some presidents want to show to the country that I am in action.
Okay.
But those actions were not taken into next steps, next actions. So those were kind of.
But you really can't say that, Professor. I believe the most active presidential commissions that have been appointed and followed through really are these presidential commissions on political victimization. There was a presidential commission appointed for political victimization under President Gotabaya Rajapaksa that even attempted to summon the Attorney General to question him on why he filed this action in court. I mean, this is unheard of before. Those commissions are the most active, Professor. So you can't really say that all commissions are not active.
No, but those actions are not the actions that I mean. Like there was I mean, there's a famous this central bank bond scam commissions, and Easter Sunday
Professor,
commissions.
What bond scam? Did something like that happen in Sri Lanka?
That is the issue. Like now it was completely thrown out and nothing is happening, and we were not able to even get the main suspect into the system. Like he is Singaporean, and the president, the guy who brought that guy is now president of the country. Like that is the country that we are living in. So but this commission's business is a kind of political jargon and political rhetoric, and they just want to show that I am in action, and they are just putting different kind of commissions and activating all this resources into this thing, and it ended up with nothing, and just a piece of papers, like some documentations for the libraries. So that is what was happening here.
So, Professor, moving forward, under the executive presidential system, what I've come to understand, of course, with the few years that I've had experience here, being a journalist and, of course, moving around with politicians, is the fact that without political will, investigations into corruption allegations, investigations into this massive, large-scale, white-collar crimes that are taking place in Sri Lanka cannot move forward. I don't know what Sri Lanka would be like under a parliamentary system, much like the Westminster parliamentary system in the UK, because I haven't lived under that kind of a system in a country like ours. But under the executive presidential system, I think it's safe to say that without political will, without the will of the president at least, we can't go down that path. So, looking at Sri Lanka's immediate future, do you see this political will coming into force so that fraud and corruption can be dealt with, which has also been cited as one of the main reasons for this economic collapse that we're experiencing right here?
I think next couple of elections will be the kind of stage to look at this issue. I think people are people are waiting to look at that, whether they will be able to find some group of people who have this engagement and this bond and the will to implement good governance in this country. There are two different things, like you need to have good policy formation processes and good implementation arms. So implementation side, you need to get a good person into the executive presidency if you are going to continue with this system. At the same time, you need to have a group of people who could craft the policy needed and to implement those policies with the president. So these two things are the main part of the political decision making in terms of political will, and I think now we are going to open the country for that huge discussions in coming months, and we will be able to have that discussion very productively, and then to take decisions.
Professor, we've just got 1 minute left. One final question, an important one, one that of course you can maybe even decline to answer if it is not up your alley, but looking at the candidates that are coming up to contest the presidency who are trying to, put their name in the hat. Do you see any potential winners?
Well, that is very difficult question to answer, and we are trying our best to engage with the different kind of political groups and different kind of political parties to form an alliance and to form a good piece of policies and to get a good group of people. So we all are in a kind of middle of that whole process, and I don't have an answer that who the best person to be elected by next election. I can't say.
Well, Professor, we will make sure that we will invite you on the show once the presidential election is hopefully announced next year, and then pose the same question to you again. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Professor Charitha Herath, the parliamentarian from the People's Freedom Congress and also former chairman of the COPE committee, for joining us on the inaugural episode of Face to Face. Accountability is the glue that binds the commitment to the result. For years, Sri Lankans have not had this glue, but we are beginning to form it now because of the situation that the country has faced. And of course, the judgment of the Supreme Court forms part of this glue that has finally binded the commitment that these politicians made to the people in Sri Lanka and the results that it has brought to the general public as a whole. Think wise when you vote, of course. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow. Until then, take care and God bless.
Newsfirst, face to face with Shalan Benedict.